In the escalating trade war, Donald Trump says he's pulling out the big guns. I'm Mercedes Stephenson. The West Block starts now. He called it the big one. The American president announced a whopping global reciprocal tariff plan. But how will Trump's big planned levies affect small Canadian cities? And what has been the Trump effect on intelligence and security across the world? We speak with a former senior CSIS official. Another week, another tariff, but this one is Donald Trump's biggest threat yet. The U.S. president wants to impose global tariffs, potentially so striking the Canadian Chamber of Commerce calls it, quote, a step towards dismantling a rules-based international trade order that has made much of the Western world, especially the U.S., more prosperous and productive. Trump's executive order gives his staff about 6 months to look at tariffs other countries have put on America, then hit back. This is in addition, in case we all need help keeping track, of his other promised Canadian tariffs, 25% on everything with the exception of 10% on energy. That could kick in on March 4th. On top of that, steel and aluminum could get slapped with an extra 25% on March 12th. If that weren't enough, on Monday, Trump floated the idea of separate tariffs on semiconductors and pharmaceuticals. And on Thursday, mused about up to a 100% tariff on cars coming from Canada. All of these levies will undoubtedly be felt by consumers at the gas pump, the checkout, and in their wallets. But from job losses to strained businesses, manufacturing communities could be hit extra hard. Windsor is expected to be one of the Canadian cities that will feel the wrath of the tariffs the worst. Mayor Drew Dilkens joins us now. Mayor Dilkens, thank you so much for making time for us. I know a difficult time for your city right now.
Yeah, it's certainly a lot of uneasiness and a lot of uncertainty here in Windsor.
What effect will the tariffs that have been put in place so far when it comes to steel and aluminum and the threatened incoming tariffs have on the economy of Windsor, where you are so close and so integrated with the United States, with Detroit, and so dependent on that trade?
Yeah, you teed that up nicely, because Windsor is Canada's auto capital. Literally a kilometer away, we have the city of Detroit, which is the motor city. And our supply chains in the auto industry and the parts sector have been built up so tightly. It's such an integrated supply chain that it really is hard to say that a car that rolls off the finish line in Detroit or in Windsor was made in either country, because the parts that go into that production before it rolls off the finish line have crossed the border on average 6 or 7 times for continuous work to be improved before it rolls off the finish line. And so we have this tightly integrated economy that any threat that disrupts it with the effect of tariffs will have a negative impact on my city and our country for sure, but will have an equally impactful result to workers and residents across the other side of the border too.
Everybody, I think, thinks about the very busy border crossing that is Detroit-Windsor, thinks about autos, but there's also a vibrant agricultural industry in the surrounding Essex region. You ship a lot of agricultural products, like vegetables, to the United States. What impact will that have on both that industry and on the American consumers who are used to getting those fresh vegetables?
Yeah, so Windsor is home to the busiest commercial border crossing between the United States and Canada. The Ambassador Bridge carries about $400 million of goods each and every day. And so it's not just cars and auto parts in the city of Windsor, but literally within 20 minutes in our county, we have the second largest area of greenhouses. We call it land under glass, anywhere in the world. Only Holland has more. And so 85% of the production that is I should say produce that is produced at these facilities is exported to the United States. So you can't go into a Kroger or a Meijer grocery store, almost every Costco across the United States. If you went to the produce section, you picked up the cucumbers or the tomatoes, they originate from Essex County. And so the impact is huge. And I guess the question is, will American consumers, would they be willing to pay 25% more for the produce that they buy? We're kind of wondering, why are we at this place right now?
Yeah, I was reading a State of the City speech you gave in which you referred to this as madness, the madness of these tariffs. What is the impact on you and on the community there when you are so close to the United States, and now what has once been your most trusted and closest ally, people cross the bridge to work in each other's countries every day, suddenly becoming a serious potential economic threat?
Yeah, it's not lost on me. I was mayor during COVID, and it wasn't lost on me when the borders closed at that particular time that I had calls from several CEOs at hospitals in Detroit saying, Drew, what do you think is going to happen with the border? Do you think it's going to be a full close? But our folks in the middle of a pandemic kept crossing, kept supporting U.S. healthcare. The city of Detroit itself went through a very difficult time, but we were there to help support them. We have been the best friend, the best ally, the largest trading partner of the United States for God knows how long, forever and a day, let's put it that way. And so it's offensive to us, I think, that we're at this point that Canada, of all countries, would be the subject of the president's tirades and his focus at this particular time. In many ways, it's like picking on Switzerland, except Canada, in our context, we've been there. We've had soldiers lose their lives fighting alongside American soldiers in Afghanistan and other places as they seek to avenge the things that happened in their country after 9/11, which we felt deeply as Canadians as well. An attack on them was an attack on us. And so I go back to a book that I read on the War of 1812, where it talked about cannons being placed in Detroit along the waterfront, facing what is now the city of Windsor. And I wonder what the folks at that particular time felt standing along our waterfront, looking at Detroit with cannons faced at them. And although there's no artillery focused our way today, certainly this economic threat is analogous to that feeling.
When you speak to your American counterparts, like the mayor of Detroit, what do they make of these tariffs? What do they say to you about how seriously we should take them, or Donald Trump's threat to annex Canada? I mean, Windsor would be possibly one of the first cities there that could be at risk. What do you hear from them?
Yeah, and we know, and that's why we formed the Border Mayors Alliance across country. We've got 37 mayors across our country now who have, from border cities, who have joined forces because we know our communities are going to get hit first and we're going to get hit the hardest. And the whole idea of linking arms across our country was then being able to reach across the border to American mayors on the other side of the border across the country to say, you know what, we need to have your voices amplified in this conversation. And so I've had many conversations with mayors, including the mayor of Detroit and many other places in the state of Michigan. And almost unanimously, they understand the impact of a tariff would be negative for their workers and their communities. I think the reality is, my takeaway is, it just seems from their minds that the sense is that this is just a negotiating tactic by President Trump. And so in some ways, you're comforted to think that that's how they view their president. But at the same time, as the mayor of a city in Canada, I don't have the luxury to sit back and think that this is all just going to be okay and this is some form of negotiating tactic. Never before have I heard an American president, at least in my life, threaten to take Canada as the 51st state and continue to double down on that thought. And so it's unnerving for us. Certainly there's the economic risk that we have in front of us. But I think, the takeaway here for me is that what I see happening in our country is a rallying cry for patriotism, for people now wanting to stick together and figure out a pathway that's going to get us to a better point. And I think that pathway exists if we only knew what the goalposts were, what the end game was. If it's an early renegotiation of NAFTA, great. Let's sit down and figure that out and figure out what the points of friction are and how we can move past that. If it's really about border security and fentanyl, well, great. We have a shared goal as two nations that share the world's longest undefended border. We have a shared goal in wanting to overcome that and find pathways to eradicate fentanyl from all of our communities. But I think it's fair to say at this point in time, we don't really know what the president's end goal is. And until we know what that end goal is, it's very difficult for us to continue to throw darts at the dartboard, hoping that we pop the right balloon. And so I think we need to, work to find out what the goalposts are, what the end game is, and then we'll get the teams together and we'll get a resolution at some point in time.
Mayor, I know you know the people of your city very well. Windsor is just, salt of the earth, well known for hard work ethic, for being friendly, also tremendously vulnerable in this situation. Tell us about what these tariffs will mean in terms of potential job losses or economic consequences for the people of Windsor. What's going to happen to your city?
We're on the precipice of it being catastrophic. 25% tariff for us would certainly mean that the price of vehicles would go up. People would simply defer spending 25% more for the price of a vehicle, waiting for some more certainty. It may make imports more attractive, quite frankly. And then how that cascades and works its way through the supply chain is that the OEMs, the auto manufacturers, will adjust their inventory for reduced sales. That means laying people off in the factory. In the parts sector, they're going to need fewer people to make fewer parts for fewer cars. And ultimately, as it works its way down the supply chain, there'll be a person at a Tim Hortons who, will be out of a job because all of us are going to start squirreling away our pennies and just weathering the storm for this rainy day until there are better times. And so it will have a dramatic impact. I think it will happen really quick. And I'm talking about the period of weeks as opposed to months. You'll start seeing that impact. And at the end of the day, the prices for vehicles will simply go up for U.S. consumers. And so a lot of this seems like bluster. We're used to 4 years of Donald Trump in the past, where there's no shock and awe in terms of what comes out of his mouth. But at the end of the day, we have to take this seriously. We are. And I just hope we get some certainty at the federal level in terms of who's leading us forward for the next 4 years, because I think that is a really important part of this conversation. We know there is friction between our current prime minister and the president. There doesn't seem to be a lot of love lost in that relationship. And I think the importance of having a strong relationship with the Canadian prime minister and the U.S. president at this time, I think you can't underscore that importance, any more strongly than we need to have solid leadership who can speak the president of the United States language today.
Do you think that means we need to have an election?
Well, I think we need an election. We need an election ASAP to give us certainty as a country of who's going to lead us for 4 years and who's going to manage this relationship. The uncertainty that we have at the top right now is doing no one any good. And I think the president is leveraging the uncertainty that exists right now to his advantage, which is causing more concern and anxiety for Canadians. And so the sooner we can get that certainty, the better it's going to be for everyone across the board, including this relationship, this very important trading relationship between the United States and Canada.
Mayor, thank you so much for joining us. Our thoughts are with the people of Windsor. We wish you the best, and we appreciate your time.
Oh, we're going to make it through. This is a rallying cry. We're linking arms down here. We're going to make it through, and there are better days ahead.
I have no doubt. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mercedes.